Hey everyone, it's Blake. Welcome in to episode number 15 of our WWF Invasion 2001 save in TEW9. This is SmackDown for June 5th, 2001. The fallout from a noteworthy edition of Raw, as you know, as it was Kurt Angle defeating Kane for the Intercontinental Championship. Then we had Shane McMahon reveal that it wasn't Eric Bischoff who was the person who was responsible for the big security breach that Vince was trying to get to the bottom of. Instead, Shane claimed it was himself. And so now we are going to get things started on this particular show. The road continues to the King of the Ring, which will take place in several weeks, but we know there will be quarterfinal action kicking off on Raw next week. So we start here with The Undertaker and Kane right off the bat to start this show. These two are in the ring, and they are furious. And we know why, because it was an attack from Edge, Christian, Austin, and Angle to end the show after Angle had triumphed to win the Intercontinental Championship. And so Taker and Kane are out here, and they're calling out Edge and Christian. Taker's telling them to get their asses out here because they are going to beat the hell out of them. That is Taker's, message here to Edge and Christian. And so here comes Vince McMahon, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Kurt Angle. Now, as they come out, we can see Taker and Kane getting ready to get out of the ring and go fight these guys. But Vince just says, hang on just a damn second. He said, don't you even think about coming up here, Vince says. For starters, you should be thanking me for allowing you into the arena. Because as you've seen, as long as you're under WWF contract, I can do whatever I want with either one of you, Vince says. And I should have fired Kane last week after he put his hands on me and chokeslammed me right there in that very ring. But I didn't, because I want to make sure that you guys get what you have coming to you. And that's when Vince pulls out something from his jacket pocket, and he says, so you can make your way up here if you want. But Vince holds up this document, and Vince says, this document right here says that you cannot lay a finger on me, Steve, or Kurt here tonight. This is a protective order that does not allow you to touch any of us or you will be arrested, Vince said. You can see Austin kind of giving Vince a look at this because we know Austin is ready to fight at any time. He's chomping at the bit to get after these two. But Vince says, we are going to stand right here, and I'm going to tell you, you actually get what you want. Taker, Kane, I'm going to give you a match against Edge and Christian because they've proven they're one of the best tag teams in the world. And there's nothing they would enjoy more than to come down there and beat the hell out of you two insubordinates, Vince says. So we've got the match set. Taker and Kane cannot touch Vince McMahon tonight, or Steve Austin, or Kurt Angle, but we do have our main event set. It is going to be The Undertaker and Kane taking on Edge and Christian. 92, hot way to start the show. And then we get into, wow, a much better match than I expected. 75, are you kidding me? Between Rhyno and Billy Gunn. Now, there is a combination I would not have expected, and clearly the great chemistry. I would not have expected that either. So, wow, that was, maybe this is going to be a good show. As it was, Rhyno getting the win in 7:07 with the spear. It was for the Hardcore Championship. So, kind of the story here, these two guys lost in the King of the Ring qualifiers. We have them come back out here to start SmackDown, and it is Rhyno defending his championship. And once again, the theme here is that we are seeing that continued uptick in aggression from Rhyno after losing that match to Chris Jericho in the King of the Ring qualifier. So this was way better than I expected it to be. I thought this was just kind of a throwaway match, maybe in the low 60s, something like that. But at 75, I will take that here for this one. So there you have it. Rhyno defends his championship, and he seems to be on a tear right now after losing that match to Jericho. All right. Now, again, another 92. We're doing well here. As we go to the back, and then it is our usual group here. As it is Vince McMahon sitting there, and you can tell Vince has something on his mind. He's already made the big announcement for the main event. He has no worries that The Undertaker or Kane are going to come after him. And so, Austin just sitting there saying, Vince, I think we should get our hands on Taker and Kane tonight. And he said, well, Steve, listen, there's nothing in this protective order that says you can't touch them, but they cannot touch you. That was the beauty of this whole thing. And Vince says, those two are not smart enough to understand that. And so then Vince says, but guys, we need to talk about something else. He says, you heard Shane. And we've talked about this. Shane was the person behind this security breach. And I had put a lot of work into what I was doing to try to take down WCW with Eric Bischoff. And that's when Austin just looks over at Vince and says, He says, I'm not having it. I know where you're headed, Austin says, but I am not having it, Vince. And Vince just says, look, Steve, let me just try to give Eric a call, see if we can work this whole thing out. And so Vince pulls his phone out, and Austin just knocks the phone out of Vince's hand. And he says, Vince, don't you dare call Eric Bischoff. He says, I don't want that snake coming back around me, because if he does, I will give him a stunner again, just like I did last week. And Austin says, don't even think about it. So Austin, not exactly thrilled here. Austin walks off, not wanting Vince to try to make amends with Eric Bischoff. And then Angle kind of looks over as he sees Austin walk off, and Angle just says, Vince, maybe we should call. Maybe we should call Eric. And Austin hears it. He turns around and said, Kurt, no, you're not calling Eric Bischoff. And so Austin just kind of shuts it down again, as Kurt trying to perhaps get his friendship back with his friend Eric. So that is kind of your story here. But we also have William Regal walk in. And that is where, William Regal comes in, and he's talking about this whole thing with Booker T, DDP, and Shane. And Regal just says, guys, I think I may have something for you. So we kind of leave it there, 92 for the segment, but Austin shutting down any possibility of trying to make amends with Eric Bischoff. All right, now we get a 70 segment here on this, as it is Chris Jericho kind of cutting a promo here, and it is Jericho talking about how, he's back in the building tonight. Remember, he was not in the building on Raw because the whole story was that he was kind of favoring the injuries that he had from the attack from the Big Show, the hard match with Rhyno, and all this other stuff. And so Jericho's saying that, look, he knows that Kurt Angle and William Regal and Vince McMahon and everyone's trying to stop him from winning the King of the Ring. And he knows that's the reason that he's about to go one-on-one with Albert, because they don't want to give him any rest. They want him to be in a situation where Albert comes out and does the same thing to him that Big Show and Rhyno did. But Jericho just says there is nothing that will stop him from winning the King of the Ring. So that's kind of your story here. Jericho still clearly not 100%, but he's trying to prove that he still has what it takes to win the King of the Ring. So 70 here for this one. And then another 70-plus match here. We're doing pretty well so far on this show. 71 for this match as Jericho does get the win over Albert. We're kind of playing up the story again. Kind of a flash pinfall here. Jericho is just having to pull out all the stops to get these wins because he is kind of, favoring those injuries a little bit. And so he manages to get the roll up on Albert. So we kind of played up the same thing with Rhyno before, and it is Jericho getting the win in this one. All right, here he comes. He's back again. Kurt Angle, 74 for this segment. And backstage, it is the group of Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, Edge, Christian, and Rhyno. What a five group that is, right? Group of five. An incredible crop of talent here. As it is Angle and Eddie who are standing there talking to Edge and Christian. Of course, Rhino's kind of there just continuing to be just, this guy's just, he's ready to tear somebody up again. And so Angle just says, guys, we both have big matches tonight. Angle says, me and Eddie are going to team up to take on the Hardy Boyz coming up here in just a minute. And he says, this is kind of something where we wanted this match. I told Vince, I told Mr. Regal that I wanted to stay fresh. I wanted to be ready for this match next week against Jeff Hardy and the King of the Ring, although we all know that Jeff Hardy has no chance against an Olympic gold medalist like me. And so Kurt says, we will be able to handle the Hardy Boyz, guys. Me and Eddie right here, we have what it takes. And then Angle says, but I've got to ask you guys, do you need a favor from me tonight against The Undertaker and Kane? Because you came through on your favor last week. And if there's anything that Mr. McMahon has taught me, it is the value of these favors. And talking about the Big Show and all this other stuff, right? So Angle says, I am going to return the favor. I'm going to come out there and help you guys against Taker and Kane. And that's when Edge and Christian just kind of look at each other and say, you know what, Kurt, we appreciate it, but hey, we are out to prove that we are the best tag team in the world. And Angle kind of gives him a look again. Of course, besides you and Steve, Edge says, besides you and Steve. But We're out to prove we're the best tag team in the world, and you don't have to worry about us there tonight against The Undertaker and Kane. We'll take care of it. And then, as these guys are talking, and they're kind of like, Angle's like, all right, I get it. But just know that I'll be there if something goes wrong. And Christian just like, Kurt, we got it. It's okay. We appreciate the offer, but we're going to go out there and prove that we are the best tag team in the world. Of course, aside from you and Steve. Christian also reiterates. And so that's when Eddie just kind of looks around. He's looking at Angle, he's looking at Edge, he's looking at Christian, and he's going, guys, it could be us four, Eddie says. Kurt, it could be me and you in the semifinals of the King of the Ring. Edge, Christian, it could be you two in the semifinals of the King of the Ring. And Eddie just tells him, and just know, there's nothing I won't do to win the King of the Ring. So Eddie says that, and he just kind of gives a little smirk, Eddie Guerrero style, and walks away. And Angle just kind of looks a little befuddled here and just kind of looks over and says, what's he talking about? And so Eddie walks off. He is going to team up with Kurt Angle coming up against the Hardy Boyz. But you can tell the heels here just kind of all have their own little personal motivation here. And that, of course, always makes for an interesting dynamic, I think. Even though they're all considered bad guys, they all also are out to get something for themselves. So 74 for this one, still getting the penalties for Eddie, but kind of putting him in here with these guys certainly helped bring this number up a little bit. All right, another match coming up. Here we go. We keep going here. The matches, this is probably our best show of the save thus far in terms of like the match ratings or the overall segment ratings for matches, that is. 80 for this one, which shouldn't be a surprise. But it is the Hardy Boyz. Matt and Jeff getting the win over Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero in 11:52 after Eddie was intentionally counted out. So Eddie just, once again talking about how there's nothing he won't do to make sure that he wins King of the Ring. Well, maybe part of it is finding himself in trouble here against the Hardy Boyz and then just simply walking out on Kurt Angle. So Eddie Guerrero has walked out on Angle and they get counted out. And so that is kind of your story here of this one. So again, nothing wrong with kind of using this sort of finish when you've got all these guys in here. And Angle with a 92 on the in-ring performance. Eddie 64, still kind of getting the penalties we talked about with Jeff with a 73. So you can tell Kurt Angle versus Jeff Hardy on Raw. You better believe I've got big expectations for that match. So it was fun to kind of put these two teams together. Keeps Angle kind of involved here. And so Angle and Eddie getting the win, losing via count out, but Eddie perhaps getting what he wants by walking out on the match. So an 80 here for this one. And then we get to an interview here as it is Rikishi with Michael Cole. Only gets a 50, so kind of a little bit of a step down. But Rikishi, basically the story here is we know Rikishi's going to face Edge in the quarterfinals, and Rikishi saying that he will be watching the main event, and he wants Edge to know that he'll be watching because he may come out there and give Edge a little bit of a stink face before their quarterfinal match coming up in the King of the Ring. So that is, just kind of something here where you get a little fun back and forth. Rikishi telling Edge, kind of putting him on edge a little bit, pun intended, for the main event with him and Christian against Taker and Kane. 50 here for this segment. All right. Now we get a tag team match coming up here as it is the Dudley Boyz versus Too Cool. And commentary kind of pushing, this seems to once again be the work of Vince McMahon and William Regal. Because we know Steve Austin and Kurt Angle have had their issues with Too Cool and Rikishi over the past month. But also, we know they've had recent issues with the Dudley Boyz after it was security hauling out the Dudley Boyz last week after they tried to get up in the faces of Austin and Angle. They continue to say that they're going to find a way to get those tag team championships. And so, 65 for this match. So it didn't quite hit the expectation of some of the others, but still pretty good. And it is the Dudleys getting the win over Too Cool after Bubba gets the pin on Scotty 2 Hotty after the 3D. So, two very likable tag teams having to face each other here. And again, seemingly the whole concept is that Vince and Regal are trying to continue to kind of pit all these guys against each other to maybe make them a little bit more, advantageous situations for the bad guys here. So the Dudleys get the win on this one. And then it is going into the back where it's a 90 rating for this one. I mean, these guys just deliver all the time. And we see Austin and Angle watching the monitor here, and, it's just Austin saying the Dudley Boyz. I've already beaten the Dudley Boyz one time, Steve says. Me and Triple H went out there and we beat their asses a month ago to retain our tag team championships. And Kurt just says, you're damn right we did, Steve. And Austin just looks over and says, Kurt, you weren't in the match. And so Angle just says, yes, but as the tag team champions, we were successful in beating the Dudley Boyz. And Austin just shaking his head at Angle. So it's continued back and forth here between these guys. And then that is where we talk, we hear William Regal talking about this idea. And apparently, since the last time, that's kind of where we left it, was that Regal had this idea for Vince. And you can tell Vince's mood has gotten a little bit better here. And he's just like, Mr. Regal, I've got to admit, this is one of the best ideas you may have ever had. And he says, don't you worry, we will tell the whole world about this idea when the time is right. And so Regal has perhaps a great idea for Vince here. You see Austin and Angle, they're intrigued. They want to know about it. Austin says, Vince, I need to know what this idea is. Remember, it's all about trust. And Angle says, that's right, Vince. We've got to be able to trust each other. And so, still pushing the theme of trust, but William Regal apparently has a big idea for Vince McMahon, and Vince seems pretty happy about it. All right. The segment had to take a spiral at some point. And so this one, look, this is not a big thing, but I just wanted to get it in here, just to kind of make sure we added it in. But in a 32 rated segment, we do get the official announcement. We're going to finally get that blow-off match between Hardcore Holly and Crash Holly next week on Raw. So it's kind of set up, Hardcore and Crash next week. We're going to get that on Raw is War. So not much more other than just to kind of note that. All right, and then, again, things are going to cool the crowd off a little bit here, but it is a match between Jazz and Lita. So this gets a 37, but remember, Jazz is coming in with not a lot of popularity, and so this is kind of something where we have to sort of work around that in a lot of our shows. But in a terrible match, as you can see, 522, Lita gets the win over Jazz, but it is after Jazz basically gets disqualified by just going on the attack, right? It's sort of one of those rage DQ finishes. And so we did storytelling too, so that brought the rating down a little bit. But, of course, why do we have to do it this way? Well, because the whole thing is Lita's not going to lose to Jazz right now because Jazz doesn't have the popularity. But I am looking at the way we're booking this, a little ways out, and I can see the path to where Jazz starts to get, some of these wins. And you'll see how we're going to kind of book around that. That's always one of the tough things when you're introducing someone like this and wanting to make them a main attraction here. You've got to find ways to work around some of these popularity gaps. And so that's one of the big ones. There is a big one between Lita and Jazz. So getting Jazz into this match gets her a little bit more exposure, but it will start to pick up, I think, with the way we're going to do this. So 37 for this one. Things pick up a little bit with the actual segment. So Jazz keeps the assault going on Lita, the Rage DQ finish. But here comes Trish, right? Because she's been involved in this whole thing. So Trish comes out, makes the save this time around. Last time it was Chyna coming out and all these other things. So it's Trish coming out. So we've got an interesting dynamic here. It's sort of Trish and Lita were battling for the number one contendership for Chyna, but Chyna is also kind of on their side as everyone is trying to figure out what they're going to do about this Jazz problem, I guess you could say. So 46 for that one, and that's where that stands. All right, 52 here for this one. And it's the Dudleys again, just as they pointed out last week. Dudleys say, you know what? If security wants to come take us out, if they want to arrest us, they can do whatever they want. But they just say Austin and Angle can keep ducking us, but eventually we're going to get our match. And so the Dudleys kind of trying to call their shot here, saying that eventually they are going to get that tag team match against Austin and Angle. So we'll see if they do. But the Dudleys keeping their focus set on the tag team championships and Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle. All right, 52 for the segment. But as the Dudleys are making that statement in the 72 segment here, which Jonathan Coachman lost as usual, here comes The Undertaker and Kane. So they walk up to the Dudleys and say, listen, boys, we appreciate that you want to get your hands on Austin and Angle, but we're just here to tell you that we're going to finish it with them, and there may not be anything left of them for you. So Taker and Kane, on a mission here, and just kind of a stare down here between Taker, Kane, and the Dudleys, and making it very clear that they both teams want to destroy Austin and Angle right now, but Taker and Kane are saying they're going to do it first. So 72 here for this one, And that's kind of your story of that. So that is going to lead us into the main event, where it is going to be The Undertaker and Kane taking on Edge and Christian. And in an 83 match here, pretty good stuff. So 83, it is The Undertaker and Kane getting the win over Edge and Christian in 9:31 after Kane pins Christian. I don't know why it has the ropes for leverage. There's no way we had that on there. I really don't know where that came from, because there's no reason we would have Kane cheat to beat Christian. So I'm really not, we may have just picked the wrong thing. I don't really know. I'm curious if we did this here. Like, we didn't have that finish anywhere. So I'm not really sure where that came from. If you look at this, Kane to be the victor, Christian to lose, match to be open, Edge should accidentally be hit by Kurt Angle, as you see here. That's going to be part of the story we play into. But yeah, so I don't know where that came from. Disregard the ropes for leverage. Kane didn't need it. Chokeslam on Christian, that'll do it. But we did have one where it is notable. You know, Angle was kind of giddy about wanting to repay the favor for Edge and Christian. And, well, as we've seen from some of these heels, they just can't help themselves sometimes. And so Angle comes out when he sees maybe these guys reeling a little bit, tries to get involved. But what happens? Well, he accidentally hits Edge. And that leads to Christian being distracted, Kane taking advantage, hitting the chokeslam on Christian for the win. So 83 for the segment. Actually, let's look at this here. Kane with the best in-ring performance of the group, 85. Edge with an 81, Taker 79, Christian 75. No surprise this does well. I mean, these are, four pretty good stalwarts here in the company. So Edge and Christian come up short. Angle accidentally hits Edge. And so The Undertaker and Kane are successful. But we're not done, because in the highest rated segment of the show, which should be that way, out comes Vince McMahon, Steve Austin, and Kurt Angle, of course, has come back up the ramp. And we didn't put Edge and Christian in here, but obviously these guys are frustrated with what just happened. They're kind of out of the way. So Vince comes out. He's with Austin, who's smiling. Stone Cold Steve Austin is smiling here. And so then Kurt Angle is coming up, and you can tell Angle's still a little, shook by the idea that he just accidentally hit his friend Edge and all this. But Vince just says, "Congratulations, gentlemen." And I know there's probably, you'd like nothing more than to come up here and get your hands on me, Steve, and Kurt. Remember, you can't do that, because you will be arrested if you do. And Vince says, I could send Steve down here. I could send Kurt down there to take you out, but I'm not going to do that, because I know everyone has been joking about how I've let my emotions get the better of me. However, I received an interesting suggestion from Commissioner Regal here tonight, and I want to reveal it to the world, because I admit sometimes my emotions get the better of me. But the reason I've got the WWE to the top, and the reason that the WWF crushed WCW, is because I am a great businessman, Vince says. And so, when I'm thinking about business, and I'm thinking about what people want, he says, I think we should give the people what they want. So Vince says, Undertaker, Kane, last week on Raw, my son Shane, one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life, said that he was ready for a fight. Booker T and DDP, two of his best against the best that the WWF had to offer. And Vince says, well, we all know that is Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle. And Vince says, I agree that what a match that would be. But you know what, Vince says, before we get to that, I think there's another match that the people would like to see, that I would like to see. And Vince says, so, next week on Raw is War, we will welcome WCW, Shane McMahon, Booker T, DDP into Raw with open arms, because we're going to see them get their tag team match that they want. Booker T and DDP against two of the best that the WWF has to offer. The Undertaker and Kane, Vince says. So, what a tag team match that's set for next week. For the first time, WCW is going to wrestle here on Raw. It's going to be Booker T and DDP against The Undertaker and Kane. And so Vince and Austin and Angle get ready to walk off, but Vince says, oh, wait just a second. I almost forgot. So he's kind of mocking what Shane did last week, where Shane did the big reveal after he made the challenge, right? Actually, there was one other thing we need to add to that match, Vince says. And since this is such a big match for the WWF, I feel like there need to be some stakes involved. And so, he says, here's what we're going to do. If you and The Undertaker and Kane win, then you will get your match against Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle, and they'll even put up the WWF Tag Team titles. And Vince says, but if you let Booker T and DDP come into the WWF on Raw is War and beat a WWF tag team, well, then there are going to be consequences, Vince says. And those consequences will be that Undertaker, Kane, if you lose to Booker T and DDP, I am going to fire one of you, Vince says. And that is how we go off the air, as The Undertaker and Kane are looking at each other. Austin and Angle seem amused by this, and Vince has just revealed it's going to be Booker and DDP against The Undertaker and Kane next week. He is inviting WCW and Shane McMahon to Raw is War, and they are going to face The Undertaker and Kane, and that if Taker and Kane win, they get a tag team title match against Austin and Angle. If they lose, Vince is going to fire either The Undertaker or Kane. 96 segment. That's how we go off the air. Big segment to end the show. Gets a 78 overall. Again, a lot of that we know is built off of kind of some of the later matches and such, but we still have to, so one of the reasons too we got knocked here, this would have been a much higher rating. So one of our storylines is now dropped below hot. So I gotta tweak that a little bit, because it'll be very easy to do based on some of the stories we have going. But we need to fix that a little bit. I said that last time around. We still kind of have the note that the dramatic stakes with some of the storylines, so I've got to clean those up a little bit. I did look going into this one. I'm like, there was one that was right there on that number of like the minimum you needed. It was right there, so I have a feeling that one dropped a little bit here somewhere. So I got to get that updated, but nonetheless, we'll take care of that, and it'll be fine. But what a tag team match. A huge match. One of the biggest matches, maybe the biggest match of our save thus far, coming up on Raw is War. Booker and DDP versus The Undertaker and Kane. All right, let's see what else we need to get to before we wrap up this particular show. Made $125,000 in profit. That gets a little higher on Raw. Popularity recap, pretty much the same everywhere, so that's that. All right, let's see what else we get to before we wrap up. All right, so SmackDown, positive show. Nothing more than that. We did have Sunday Night Heat. Okay show. A few extremists either loved or hated it. If you want to see the Heat results, really nothing notable here. I did give Chris Nowinski his first match. He got a 30, so we'll take that. But really not a whole lot other than that on Heat. All right, let's check our mail. And Conan, who we had, I'm sure on the short list somewhere, joined Noah. That's about it. So Rhyno still feeling the grueling effects. I guess we can check Rhyno a little bit and just kind of look at his physical history and all that. But like he's fine. Rhyno's okay. Like we don't have to worry about Rhyno. He's fine. So Rhyno's okay. So no big deal there. All right, so there you go. That was SmackDown. Like I said, we set up quite a main event coming up on Raw is War. We've got the King of the Ring quarterfinals kicking off, so that will be kind of one of your every show I feel like is must-see now in terms of the big angles we have leading into, where things are going with this invasion. But that will probably be one of our biggest TV shows, or maybe our biggest TV show thus far that we've done in this series coming up on Raw. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Always appreciate your feedback. I am still working on getting ready to start that next save because we did tease that in one of the previous videos. So you guys put your votes in, and I've got a couple ideas based off of that. So we'll get one of those going here pretty soon. And so, keep your suggestions coming. If there's anything else pops up, let me know. But for now, hope you guys enjoyed that edition of SmackDown. And on the next episode of our WWF Invasion 2001 save, it will be a huge edition of Raw is War.